This meeting of the Cosmetology and Barber Board of Examiners, first orders of business, I believe, will be to take our roll.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Kelly Barker, Mr. Jimmy Boyd, Miss Anita Charlton,
Present.
Miss Nina Coppinger,
Here.
thank you, Mr. Frank Gambusa,
Here.
Mr. Ron Gillihan,
Here.
Miss Brenda Graham, Miss Wybette Granger,
Present.
Miss Judy McAllister, Miss Patricia Richmond,
Present.
Ms. Becky Russell,
Here.
Miss Mona Sappenfield, and Amy Tanksley.
Present.
Thank you. We're all here and we have quorum to proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will move on to acknowledging our visitors and guests. Do we have any schools represented here today? If you would, please rise and just somebody from each school, tell me who you are and where you're from. Thank you for coming in this morning. Appreciate it. Nice to see you this morning. Appreciate you coming down. Anybody else? Okay. All righty then. We will need to approve the minutes of the April 9th, 2018 meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes?
I wanted to ask a question. It says that not attending the subcommittee meeting, it says that Frank was not here, but were you not here for the subcommittee meeting that morning?
Was you?
Yeah. It's on the page 16.
Thank you.
Originally, I wasn't going to be because my wife had operation,
Right.
but I was able to get here.
Thank you. I've made the change.
Thanks, Beck.
On here as well. Are there any other corrections? If not, we'll need a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a second.
A second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay. Miss Roxana, we're down to you, I believe.
Thank you. Yes, we will start with our appearances before the board. First, on your iPads, you have a new Barber School application, and this is for Barber's University School. Mr. Jawan Buckhalter is here. If you give me a minute. As you speak, you'll make sure that's right. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Appreciate you coming down. If you'll give us just a minute to take a look at your application here, we'll be with you in just a minute.
This school is located in the Memphis area. It is 2,685 square feet. The business license, curriculum, contingency plan, the 15 tentative contracts, floor plan, application, and fee were received in the board office timely. And I will let the board review the documents for any questions.
Roxana, could you help me out with this one? On the age requirement, is it not 18?
17 for Barbers.
It is still 17?
And, yes, and
Okay.
high school.
Yes.
I did have Mr. Lost my. Buckhalter update the information on the high school credentials because that was still a requirement. And so his contract does reflect that.
I was just wondering, is this located in where another barber school originally was on Coleman?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay.
Mr. Buckhalter, in the front of it appears in the front of your school. I think I see what would be a reception desk kind of at the front entrance. I don't see anything designated for a waiting area, but is that where you intend your waiting area to be?
No, I have waiting area along the side of the.
Okay.
Okay.
I see those. And where would your sinks be?
The sinks are behind the barber chairs, and I have two that's designated for. Just regular sinks and chairs.
Okay. So those are the two near the rear.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
On your refund policy, is there like a percentage they'll get back if they're there like over half the time, or do you have a cutoff on the percentages and when you retain the full tuition?
My school right now is a pay as you go.
They pay every week or every month.
Yes, ma'am.
And if they were to not come back at all, you just waive their what they would owe you away.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to think about putting in here somewhere just as a school owner, a percentage. Like if they come for, like they've done half their time, anything over that, they still owe you the full amount to cover you because you've got to do all the paperwork and pay the teachers whether they come or not. So that's a suggestion as a school owner that way you're covered, and there's usually a percentage chart that you can look online and find what's pretty doable around Tennessee.
Have any questions? We have a motion.
I motion for the school to open.
I'll second it.
We have a motion that's been properly seconded to approve. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries. Congratulations. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a cosmetology brand new school. This is Day DAY College of Cosmetology. Miss Amanda Holmes. Miss Holmes. Nice to meet you. Should turn on, but you make sure it's red.
Okay.
You have before you the application for this school. It is located in Henderson. The square footage is 2,640. The board office received the business license, curriculum, contingency plan, one blank contract, floor plan, the application, and fees. I'll let you review and ask any questions of Ms. Holmes so that we can evaluate her application.
Coming down here today.
I got a question, Miss Amanda. Just out of curiosity, what does DAY stand for?
Um, my son passed away in a car wreck 2 years ago. David Austin Young. Sorry. So it's in honor of him.
That's nice.
Thank you.
Is this going to be a full service school with aesthetics as well?
No, sir, just
Okay.
cosmetology and nails.
Okay.
Everything in order to me. I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I will second it.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Where are your shampoo bowls on the layout?
To the right, in front of the dryers. The right side of the page.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions? So we have a motion and a second. It's properly approved. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Are you all set? Thank you. Next, we're on to our applications for examination. These applicants start on your iPad on page 46. Applicants for examination with felony charges. These would be for Brandy Castle, Charlize Kingslow, Jessica Cherie Epperson, Aaron Gentry, Melissa Martin, Brooke Whitaker, and David Kendrick. I will let the board review the letters of recommendation and the sheet or explanation of the charges. All these would be within the last 3 years or the individual still incarcerated. The last individual in the group is a reciprocal applicant, and so they are currently incarcerated in Tennessee, but the application is already for licensure, not the exams, where all of the others you'd be approving to take the exam, but it would follow along the same guidelines. If we do a 2-year probationary agreement, we'll make sure that that's in our file before we proceed to license via reciprocity.
Roxana,
Yes, Ms. Coppinger.
Since I can't see anything, which is really a bummer here, but can you explain why the last applicant should get reciprocity?
Absolutely. So on Mr. David Coppinger, he currently has a license, I believe, in Indiana, and it's a barber probationary license. And so because we can accept a reciprocal license as long as they substantially meet our requirements. This license is different than ours because we don't really do probationary licenses. So with that in mind, if the board is okay with the recommendation that we've got, and then we've got also his information from the Indiana State Prison facility, we could enter a 2-year probationary or however long probationary period the board agrees to, but we would be able to license him by the fact that he has a license since 1993 in Indiana, same number of hours, both exams. That license is active, but it's not a barber license. It's a probationary barber license because of the felony. That's how they do it in that state. So if we're okay with that, then we would probably treat it the same way we would applicants to test. And as long as we've got that 2-year probationary period or whatever the board decides, then we can consider the full reciprocity. I don't remember from having read it. I'm trying to read it now when he would be due to get out, but it would follow like our others.
Okay, so he has the substantial hours and he has taken both exams?
Yes, in Indiana.
Okay, thank you.
You are welcome.
On Miss Kimball, on her record of completion, it shows 1,380 hours, not 15.
I think she finished the rest in the prison. Yeah, they attached the hours that she had on a record with us prior. So she's finishing there, yeah.
Make a motion to approve for them to test and the probation with a signed agreement or protection. Probation, I'm sorry, protection. Probation.
We have a motion to approve with the signed agreed orders. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second. Are there any questions or any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. And on that list that I read out loud, the second was Chantel Kimball, so I think I had the name wrong. One applicant with international hours, and this would be an application to test as a master barber with hours from Jordan for Mohammed Al-Fugaha. Mr. Al-Fugaha has provided a certification from his country with the school showing a total of 2,500 training hours completed between 2008 and 2010. Based on other applicants, the board reviews those hours and approves them to test unless we have a concern with the documents or believe anything else is pending.
I'll make a motion to approve him to test. A second.
We have a motion and a second to approve for the test. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we are on to our reciprocity applications. We have a total of 2. The first application is reciprocity of a cosmetology instructor license from North Carolina for Deborah Ball. Ms. Ball has stated that she completed 1,500 hours in cosmetology. North Carolina requires the 1,500 hours for basic cosmetology license, and then they require 800 hours for instructor's license. The certification shows initial licensure in 1971 with 1,200 hours and an instructor's license which was issued in 1996. She was also licensed in South Carolina as a cosmetology instructor between 2007 and 2011. She has provided proof of work experience between 1993 and 2012. She's also included in the email 2 pages reflecting work in the film industry where she was doing hair design as well as teaching. My recommendation is that she be approved for reciprocity.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, you have an application for reciprocity of a cosmetology license, also from North Carolina, for April Osborne. The certification shows an initial licensure in November of 2010 with 1,353 hours by examination. Ms. Osborne has provided an email explaining work history that she has in the last few years and how she worked at a military installation, and therefore the licensing requirements might have been different. She also provided tax records from 2010 through 2012 showing work in the industry. The recommendation is to approve her for reciprocity.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. And we are on to our miscellaneous applicants. I've only got one in that category, but we had 2 things come up at the last minute that we would like to go ahead and put in this category, if that's okay.
That's fine.
I will turn the first one over to Sherelle, and then the second one will be the school.
Good morning. Hi.
Oh,
Lieutenant Glandorf, I'm the Chief Counsel for Regulatory Boards Division. I think you have before you, we have a legislative update for you all for a bill that was passed since our last meeting. You have in front of you what was Senate Bill 797 and House Bill 710. These bills were introduced into the legislature last year, not during this session. They were introduced last year. I believe it passed the House just recently on April 24th. It passed the Senate last year on March 13, 2017. So we realized that this had passed just a few weeks ago and thought we needed to bring it to your attention so that you all are aware. And what this bill essentially does, it amends 624125D 2B, which are the exceptions under the statute. And what this bill essentially does is this bill would allow any cosmetologist, manicurist, esthetician, or natural hair stylist to practice such in any recipient's residence, any of their recipient's short-term residence, or in their place of business. And such, it is an exception to the statute, so there is no regulation generally of that. So just wanted to point that out. It's a little bit, it is different than the residential barbering, which is an actual license we give out. So that's for the barbers, and for cosmetologists, it's an exception under the statute. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony,
See you today.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Ms. Coppinger. When does this go into effect?
Moment, let me I can research that, and let me get back to you in just a minute, because I just brought down the amended bill. It'll just take me a few minutes to see what the effective date is. I'm not sure if it's effective upon signature or if it's at a later date, but if you give me a few minutes, if we move on, I'll jump back in with the actual effective date for it.
Sure.
And unless we have it.
And this approves at-home services and at-business services for both licenses?
Both meaning?
Barber and cosmetologist?
No, this applies only to cosmetologists. Cosmetologists, manicurists, natural hair stylists, and estheticians.
And there's no additional licensure?
No, there's no additional licensure. It's actually an exception to the rule, where the exception used to be where you could perform services to somebody who was ill within their home. They amended that area, so that no longer is in existence. You can just do
at-home services.
At-home services. Now, the caveat is it has to be at that person's own residence, temporary residence, or at their place of business. So that is, and I'm looking at it right now for the question on the effective date. It's effective upon becoming law when it is actually signed.
Okay, last question. I'm sorry. The barbers will still be under the at-home barber license, and they'll still have to go through those steps.
Yes, ma'am.
These folks won't have those steps.
That's correct.
Just clarifying.
That's the question why we're still we're talking about blending the board. We're talking about blending licenses, but yet we're still operating separately with Cosmo and Barber and having differences. Why would we go down that path and not try to parallel them and create more unison as we move forward?
Well, yeah, I can't really speak to any comments as to why it is that way. This bill was just passed by the legislature that way. As to why, I couldn't explain.
Who do you think could answer the why, Tony?
So the sponsors of the bill is probably the best person to ask as to the history of the legislation. For the House, it was Sam Whitson was the sponsor of that bill, and then it was Senator Dickerson for the Senate.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you all.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much for letting us jump. And then the next piece, we're actually going to bring before you. You've got also documents on this. This is a kind of request and presentation from Paul Mitchell, the school, on something they would like your thoughts. Sherelle will be happy to answer. We didn't get all the paperwork until late Friday, so she and I have not had a chance to really review. It is regarding their instructor training program, so you've definitely take time to look at it. We want to make sure, since we've got Mr. Dale Jones here, he can answer any questions you might have of thinking how to offer this a little bit differently. So if you give me a minute. Questions, just make sure that the mic is on, that way they can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for coming, Mr. Jones. Good to see you. If you would you, are you ready?
Absolutely. And I can give you a quick recap. We had some conversations last week regarding the school's interest of being able to offer the instructor training program, which is 300 hours for cosmetology and barber. They are the same. Being able to offer it at their school in one setting, if you will, given that it's the teaching methodology, the same book. The exams are similar, and in most cases, we've waived the practical exam because, again, it's on teaching methodology. They've been thinking about proposing this. So this is their proposal on how they would carry it out if the board agreed that they would be able to offer the training program. So not the junior instructor piece, not the barber assistants, but the actual teaching of instructors for the hours, and offer it by a instructor that has both a cosmetology instructor license and a barber instructor license. And so this would be their way to propose doing that.
Since the school is now dual licensed, it's licensed as a barber in school and as a cosmetology school, we thought this would make sense. Matter of fact, I reached out to NACAS to see if they will allow us to do the barbering program, and they said since we already have a cosmetology instructors program in place, that's 300 hours, the same as barbering, and also the prerequisite are the same. They said many states are just having one instructor's license rather than having two licenses. So our recommendation is that we be allowed to do that.
Just the document that we're looking at here that says instructors on top.
Yes, and you should have one that has Paul Mitchell's logo on it as well.
I don't
the
have
floor
that.
plan and everything in the back.
Have backup copies.
We don't have that.
We don't have that.
No.
So essentially, this would be offering the instructors curriculum to both licensed barbers and licensed cosmetologists who want to become instructors in their designated license in one classroom setting with one instructor,
Yes.
rather than having two separate programs. Thank you.
Roxana, I have a question.
Yes.
Is that not a legislative change if we change the licensure?
Well,
Like-
and that's a good question. We would not be changing the licensure. Cosmetology instructors would still be licensed, or cosmetologists taking the curriculum would still need to be licensed as only cosmetology instructors. Barbers that have a master barber license would only get licensed as a barber instructor. So where I think Mr. Jones explained, some states have made that just one instructor license. I've been seeing more and more of that in certificates. That's correct. But in Tennessee, they are still two separate licenses. This would be so that they can teach it in one room as by one instructor that happens to have both of those licenses to teach, a cosmetology and a barber instructor license. So they're what I consider dually licensed to teach, and they would like to teach at one time to any in those disciplines.
Okay.
The caveat being, of course, that anybody getting the master barber instructor license would be licensed as a master barber to begin with, and the Cosmo will be licensed as a Cosmo. So they would have that necessary additional training in the shaving or whatever side you're looking at on that. So they would have those skill sets. It's the ability to teach. If the instructor is licensed as a barber instructor and a cosmetology instructor, that they would be able to teach additional students in that field or both fields at the same time. So you don't have the same instructor teaching Class A all day and then can only teach Class B the next day if we're putting them together in one unit. Is that a pretty accurate assessment?
Yes, sir. And again, the focus is really teaching methodologies, helping them with lesson planning, course out. Quite the same. And as you can see, our curriculum that's laid out, it's the same curriculum, both for cosmetology and barber instructors. So.
No, I know Ms. Russell and I participated in the exam questions. Would your course prepare them for their exam since it's still two different licenses? Would we be changing the exam to one exam or no?
The exam is actually the same exam for both tests.
Yes. Okay.
It's exactly.
Yeah, because you were there for the barber part. Yeah.
It's exactly the same test. The difference
I just didn't want to confuse them as students and two different tests. So.
The barber modalities versus the cosmetology modalities, those people still have that training because they were licensed as those individual fields. But in the instructor component, the instructor classes are really all about teaching methodology, grading, things that relate simply to the instructor, not the practical skills, because those are already there. They've been assessed and they've been licensed. So,
hey, Ron, this is not a carpenter. I have one more question, and then I'll mute myself. You can only hope, right? Roxana, how does it stand on the legislation of combining the license, cosmetology and barber, to one license?
That bill did not pass, so that is no longer on the table.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
There may be some requirements as to how long a person needs to be licensed prior to becoming an instructor. Isn't that correct?
So one of a bill that did go all the way through, I think we talked about at the last meeting, does allow for the 3 years of continuous licensure or anywhere within the last 10 years. So in reality, they do still need the 3 years requirement. That would still apply to cosmetology and barbers, and it is consistent now. For a while, it was continuous versus consecutive. But this session opened it up to where as long as those 3 years are anywhere in the history, because on occasion we ran into individuals that didn't renew timely and didn't have the continuous 3 years. But as long as they've been licensed for 3 years, then that would apply to both disciplines.
Well, for legal, would this even be something that the board can consider if this is a policy matter for us versus a legislative matter?
I think the board can consider it. There are some things for the board to consider. This particular school does hold both a cosmetology school license and a barber school license, and that is because it met the requirements for each under the law. So from an efficiency standpoint, this board is authorized such in situations where the school meets the requirements of the law. It's something that the board can consider to the extent that the board does not have an issue with the combining of both the cosmetologist and the barber students for this instructor training program. It does essentially set some precedent here. So I think the board needs to consider that, but it's discretionary whether or not the board wishes to allow this. We are discussing this in the context of an instructor that has a cosmetology instructor license and a barber instructor license. and a school that has a barber school license and a cosmetology school license. Just to be clear, it's not considered a dually licensed school like we have dually licensed shops. It's considered, in essence, two schools that are allowed to share one building for efficiency purposes.
And an instructor who was licensed as a barber instructor could not teach barber and cosmetology. They'd have to be licensed as an instructor on both sides. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's been no legislative change to permit that, and so that would still be the requirement.
Have any other questions? Comments?
I'd like to
And
make
I
a
will
motion to
point
approve
out-
the request.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to go ahead. What was your comment?
I will point out that a little bit later, we are going to need to discuss the curriculum rules because those need to be updated in light of a recently passed law, and that's something we'll go back to. So what they're requesting doesn't conflict with the rules, but those rules do need to be updated.
Due diligence, you haven't found anything conflicting to this that we're just going to have to pedal backwards later.
There's nothing that would take this request out of the board's consideration. It would be purely up to the board whether to allow this. Again, there's nothing to stop the board from allowing this request to move forward. And the board has full discretion either way that the board wishes to go because there's no dual school license. We have two schools that are under one building. So it's up to the board to determine now and moving forward how it wishes to permit schools to operate. And of course, the decision today would only be applicable to Paul Mitchell School. This particular applicant, this isn't essentially an informal opinion that would apply to everyone. Anyone with a request would need to come before the board and have their request individually evaluated.
Okay, I had to come off mute. Sorry. So, if a barber and a cosmetologist are sitting in the same classroom taking this instructor's course from a duly licensed person, they're each getting it from their own separate schools in one classroom. Is that correct?
Well, the schools share a building, so in essence,
That's two different schools, right?
They can share a classroom, but the licenses, unlike your dual shop license, it is two separate licenses. And so that's what makes this discretionary and up to the board, depending upon the direction that the board wishes to take.
The only thing, initially, just when we're faced with this initially, it seems like a good idea, but I'm not sure right now, until I've had time to digest it, what the unintended consequences would be. Maybe school owners would know more about that.
And as a school owner, I don't see any unintended.
So the student would apply for a barber or a cosmetology instructor's license, and they would get or. They couldn't get, even though they were in the same classroom sitting next to the barber, they couldn't get both licenses, two birds to kill one stone.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And if you think about it, I guess their proposal is for the big programs, the cosmetology and barber. But if they had an esthetician that wanted to be an esthetician instructor, it's the same teaching methodology, right? it's the same book, it's still the same exam. So they could actually have an esthetician come out from the same room where they learned the 300 hours with barbers and with cosmetologists, but their discipline is aesthetics. That's not what they're going to learn in those 300 hours. They're going to learn how to teach.
So if we had Rebecca, who's duly licensed already,
Yes.
and she wants to sit in that class as an instructor student in your class, are you proposing that she comes away with a cosmetology instructor license and a barber instructor license, or one or the other?
I imagine that she could get both instructor and the barber and the cosmetology instructor's license.
The way we've
I mean,
done
it's to your
those,
discretion. Yeah.
the board has reviewed those requests for the waiving of the practical exam because that's the identical exam. It's one and the same. The theory instructor exam goes back to some of the shaving, if you will, and the pedicuring. So most likely, if that was the case, you wouldn't waive the theory. That individual would have to take 2 theory exams and 1 practical and make the decision to pay for and obtain both licenses.
I honestly see no reason that this couldn't work. And if you think about it, our continuing education is taught much the same way for licensed instructors. We group those together. We receive our continuing education together. And especially with this coming from the same book, same type curriculum, I can't imagine it not working on both sides.
One's coming forward that other schools want to do this, that will be a case-by-case decision. Is that what we're going to do?
It would have to be. I mean, the discussion today is not for the purposes of making a broad, informal opinion on the issue. It's to review the specific request that is before you under these specific facts, because you all do have to review and approve these programs. So that's what's before you today, their specific program. That's the document that they handed out, their letter with their curriculum, with their course materials, with their floor plan. You're reviewing this specific program, which you're required to approve or deny by law. And each school that proposes something like this would have to submit its proposed program for your review.
In your definition, I'm looking on, I guess, the second page, it identifies the school as being duly licensed school. That's really not quite accurate just on that. So it's a school with 2 license programs. Okay. Is there any other discussion? I think we had a motion. Do we have a motion?
I had a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve this application for this program. All in favor say aye.
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 What did you say? Frankenstein.
Abstain.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Okay, now I will bring you then back to your iPads on our miscellaneous application, and that starts on page 106. We have only one as well. This is a request for an extension of continuing education for a barber instructor, Chanda Brady. Miss Brady is asking for an extension due to surgery, death in the family, and taking care of an immediate family member. These situations kept her from being able to complete the required continuing education timely. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 62-3-124B, the board may, for good cause, approve up to 1 additional year to complete the 16-hour requirement. That is a very different statute for the cosmetology instructors. They are allowed a one-time only extension when they request it timely. So this is a big difference, unfortunately, between our two. But in this case, as a barber instructor, I believe the 1-year extension gives her the next 5 or 6 months only. So she will be needing to, if approved, take her continuing education within this summer.
Make a motion to approve her for the
Second.
Time extension.
Have a motion and a second to approve. Roxana, could I add in that when you notify her to let her know that the
Yes, the timeline. Absolutely.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. And next we have our financial information. No big change. The report starts on page 113, and this is through the month of March. We were able to get in. It reflects the board having a total of $226,183 left over as of this fiscal year, trending about as we'd expected. Nothing out of the ordinary. And so hopefully when we finish this year, we'll have a good idea of the impact that the slight increase in fees have given us. And so I will bring it back to the legal committee to make sure we can get an update on the legal cases. And Ms. Spicer's here to answer any questions. I don't know if you want to present.
Good morning, everyone. We met in subcommittee this morning, and I just want to point your attention to the one complaint that did have a change in subcommittee. If you will note number 14 on the legal report. My recommendation for these three complaints, 13, 14, and 15, was close and flag. However, on number 14, it has not been confirmed that the refund has been made yet to the consumer. So the recommendation was changed on number 14 to execute on the refund in the amount of $195.99, or the respondent would need to pay a civil penalty of $250 if the refund is not received. And we are going to allow 30 days for the refund to be executed by the respondent. There are no other changes on the legal report. The subcommittee adopted my recommendations with the exception of number 14.
Discussion? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the legal report. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to our new business. First thing on your iPads for new business is an update on page 116. This is an update from the California Regulatory Board. They sent every state information sharing their concern for fraudulent documents and fraudulent hours throughout their state, possibly affecting many of their schools. We start with the email correspondence, and on page 117, you can see a list of first 14 schools that are listed under further review, and then schools they have closed is a total of 8. This board office, we communicated with the Deputy Executive Office for the Cosmetology and Barber Board in California to understand the magnitude of this and to kind of give us an idea of what they would be doing next. At this time, Tennessee does not receive hardly any, I can't think of any actually, California residents that have moved here to test. We receive a lot of reciprocity applications, and so those reciprocity applications consist of 1,600 hours for cosmetology, 600 for aesthetics, 400 for manicure, so they vary, and then we consider them like we do every other state. If they substantially don't meet it, don't have the work experience, they may need more hours, but if they meet our requirements, they do always take the 2 exams. We consider it comparable to our license, and they're issued reciprocity. None of those list the school that they are coming from. So, and California is not changing what they're doing. They're not going to list the school, but they are vetting their applicants the best that they can for those hours. So at this time, we don't foresee it changing our process unless the board wants to treat California differently, because most applicants are coming licensed to us. In the event that we get somebody with a transcript with just hours asking to test, then we would do what we've had to do with Virginia, and we've had to do it with Georgia and Texas, where we need to see the transcript from the school. That would then flag us to one of these schools that is going through issues with their hours, and possibly then, of course, consider not accepting those hours like we've done in other places. But at this moment, that's just not what we get from California. They have exams in so many of the languages that generally we get them through reciprocity. But I wanted to open it up. I wanted to make sure everybody knew. And then if you do decide to treat California differently, let me know.
Say nothing would change for those who are coming already licensed from the state of California.
Correct.
It would be those who would be applying for reciprocity or the ability to test if they were not already licensed.
It would be applying to test. Those with reciprocity, my question was, will they start reflecting what school they went to, in which case then we'd have a ground in which to say, no, we can't accept those hours. That's what we've gone through and still are in the middle of with Texas. If you all remember,
Basically, they're selling their hours.
Not all, but yes, they're having issues. And so this is a large number of schools. I don't know how quickly they'll resolve it, understand what's going on, revoke. But every state received this list.
I'm comfortable with your plan.
I'll make a second on that one. Are you making a motion to approve this? Let Roxanne make the decisions.
So your decision would be to treat business as usual. Obviously, anyone applying to test, we would do what we've done for any others. We don't accept any information for anyone applying to test from California without the transcript. That transcript then would match one of these schools potentially, and we would not allow them to test we wouldn't accept those hours, like we're not.
When we found out about Texas, did they start sending us lists of licenses that they had revoked or anything like that?
They did not revoke.
Okay.
We did. We went back to the licenses that we knew fell under that investigation, and we revoked a lot. We still have a few pending cases from that pipeline. But the board's decision, and you can reevaluate at any point, was to not accept hours from those 9 schools, regardless. And so to this day, we ask for, and Texas always shows the school that the hours are from anyway. So we ask for that certification from the school so that we know this happened, because a lot of those schools resolved just with a civil penalty. And our conversation at the time, and we're talking 2015, was that the board wasn't okay with that.
During that time, we were getting 30 or 40 reciprocities from Texas every month. So obviously there was a problem. We don't seek that anymore.
Oh, I think our numbers of reciprocity have flipped a lot since we've added the 2 languages. There's no doubt that we have less. And then with the consistency of substantially meeting the requirements, the board has to review less, because you've given me the authority to review that it's both exams and the number of hours.
I think the big question is whether the board for California reciprocity applicants wants to take the extra step of obtaining the transcript information in light of this list and this concern of high fraud. That's something that's not typically done in the process, so this would be an additional step. We discussed the Texas cases a little bit. I think those cases are different in that Texas made some findings that the board could stand behind. Here, we have kind of a general notice that there are some concerns, but nothing that would justify the decision to ban anybody that attended these schools. But the applications could the applicants could be required to submit transcripts if that's a step you all want to take to at least be able to identify those that might potentially be fraudulent.
And at this point, it would be the list of the 8 schools that have been closed, I assume.
And they've got 14 more that they're still reviewing.
You would put those on a temporary...
It would be at the board's discretion. I mean, we could review it down the road. If California gives us an update, we could ask for an update periodically. I think we either ask for all California reciprocity to provide their transcript, or we don't. Then the board's decision is, do we accept any of these 22 schools? And what Sherelle said is correct. They just kind of gave everyone a heads up. The investigation isn't finished. I'm not sure what the time.
Really, they're still in limbo because they haven't pressed any charges or anything yet against these schools, right?
Correct. They have not. They have not. They've given notice to everyone as soon as they found out.
They haven't revoked any licenses received or given to students who attended these schools.
Right. Not that we are aware of.
It's a fairly simple process for a student to obtain or provide a transcript. It's not, in my opinion, an overly burdensome thing. Require them to make a phone call or send an email.
Assuming the school's still open.
Assuming the school's still open. And frankly, a school that is generally a legitimate school is going to provide a transcript anyway when that person graduates and leaves, so they potentially would have one anyway. Not that all schools would do that, especially if they were not accredited.
So you just make that a requirement. If you're applying for reciprocity from California, you would need to provide a school transcript as part of the application process.
Right. Right now, that's what we're doing with Virginia, because we had an issue, and Texas, we still do. Now, Texas has theirs online, so theirs is a pretty simple, fast process. You can ask for it and get it through the state board. It's my understanding from the little communication I was able to have with the deputy director in California is that their schools are probably not licensed through the cosmetology board like ours are. And so they may not have access to the transcripts, which puts the student right back to depending on the school. It will delay them, but as Mr. Gillihan stated, they unless the school's closed, they should be able to obtain it. And then,
well, and assuming if those 8 schools are already closed, I don't know if they can get a transcript from those schools.
And I would say one option for the board, if it does wish to go the route of obtaining transcripts, is to individually review those that, for whatever reason, are not able to provide a transcript, to review those on a case-by-case basis.
Is that something that could come to the reciprocity committee? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
Hey, Ron, this is Nana Carpenter again.
Yes.
I just think when in doubt, you got to prove your education. And I think if we've done it in other places, we need to do it here. And I think we should require the transcript. And there's not that many anyway, I don't think, that come from California. And then, like Sherelle said, if they can't provide it, then they have to come before the board, or we have to, figure out what to do on an individual basis. But I think at a minimum, they have to prove their education.
Well, if they're from California and their school is on this list, there's a flag there, and otherwise you just don't get that many applications from them. I don't see that it would be a big burden on the board to take a look at these. So, any other discussion?
So we'll make a motion for all California students that are, or cosmetologists, have a copy of their transcripts. Applicants.
Yeah, I'm not just
Copy
cosmetologist.
All applicants have a copy of their transcripts, and then it can be reviewed case by case and put in front of the reciprocity board if needed.
Motion is to have the California applicants submit a transcript and be reviewed by the reciprocity committee as needed. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. So in this particular case, every reciprocal applicant, as well as anyone wanting to test, obviously, but that's already a requirement, that reciprocity will include a transcript if it is one of these schools or any others added by California. Yes. As they do their investigation. Yes. We will at this point deny because the investigation is ongoing until we have a resolution. And if they can't provide it, it would come before the board. Is that correct for the motion? Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Roxana?
At this point, any California applicant would be required to provide a transcript of their school so that we could confirm the hours. If it's one of these 22 schools, or any others possibly added, the board office would be denying based on this investigation not being completed and the hours right now.
I think it may be a little too soon to take that extra step of actually denying based on the investigation. I think we would need to, once they provide their transcripts, review it and determine whether or not they went to one of these schools and have that information, but without any further findings, denying the application may need to be handled once we get additional information that might suggest that they are indeed fraudulent, and maybe those, if we are able to determine from the transcripts that they went to one of these actually I think it's, we have the 14 plus the 8, 22 schools, maybe those applications need to come before the board as well. Some of the applicants may come from one of these 22 schools, but California is a very big state, and it's a good chance that the transcripts will not be from one of these 22 schools. So I think if it's determined that the applicant did go to one of these schools, that would need to be brought before the board. I think a denial may be premature without additional information.
Good about that, because we don't have dates or anything about when these schools may or may not have been committing fraud, and so it could be that someone went to one of these schools many years ago. And
so the denial process, although the word is deny, what we did with Texas is if the school, and the investigation lasted 1.5 years, if they went to a school in question, in this case it's 22, not 9. We started with 15, I think, with Texas. I don't know if the board can review the transcript because we don't know that those hours are good or not. California doesn't know. But the board closes the application, if you will. So I'm calling it a denial. We close it because at this time, the hours are not deemed to be acceptable. We can open it. We move the money over when it's resolved or not, pending the full investigation. And like I said, we've had these for over 1.5 years at one point. We didn't close fully or fully deny the Texas applicants until the 9 schools were either revoked, had civil penalties, the conclusion came through. So that's where I'm referring. Leaving applications just in limbo is hard. So we actually consider them still an applicant in process, but we close it at that moment because we don't know that those hours are good, if that makes more sense. But it is at your discretion. We can't just leave them open. We have to decide something with those. If they're not on this list, we're going to proceed business as usual. There's no reason to delay people that have paid $25,000 to go to school if it's not a school in question. At least I don't think we've not handled it before that way. But if they're on this list, then we need to decide. I'm calling it a denial. It's really closing the application until they can prove otherwise, because California says these 5 schools were great and then we put them through, or these 10 really were revoked, and then the board would decide now they're denial, and then nothing needs to be changed because we had sort of closed the application.
But you're about to say something.
I think one option to potentially deal with any applicants that come from one of these schools and apply for reciprocity is to consider getting additional information from California, that they might have and might be willing to share regarding each school, and considering some type of conditional licensure, if that's appropriate, so that if the investigation later reveals that specific timelines and things of that nature, we haven't kept someone out of the workforce for X amount of time.
If we give somebody some kind of conditional licensure, which I'm not sure we know how to do that, then a license is issued, and then we'd have the whole issue of getting that back if we did have a problem. So
it would be ultimately up to the board on how you wish to handle it, but I would just caution the board about broadly denying any reciprocity applicants that happen to attend one of these 22 schools, because we do have very limited information at this time. I think the decision to obtain their transcripts and to be able to identify who they are is a decision that is certainly defensible, but I would encourage the board to think carefully about denying any reciprocity applicants that happen to attend one of these 22 schools, simply because the only information we have right now is that they're under investigation, and we don't have additional information that would help us identify the scope of the fraud, and those types of things are important.
So the motion that we had was to request the transcripts from California and present to the Reciprocity Committee. And then, because you say you have to close that, that would result in a denial. Is that the way I understand it correctly?
It closes it as an applicant in process. Internally, we use it as a denial because it'll close it, but we can move the money, we can reopen it at any time. But I want to make sure that I'm clear. We're not presenting you anyone that's not on this school list, but anyone from this school you want to see. Is that correct?
We'd like to see their files in the Reciprocity Committee. Okay. And I think that, nobody else is being denied. Nobody else is being put off. For those, I don't think our intent was to deny those applications. We just simply want to have an ability for the members to consider those on a case-by-case scenario and make a determination, I guess, of whether we think those credentials and that well. But is that not what we were trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm asking you, Nana.
Oh, because sometimes the mic goes in and out. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if there's any way possible with the schools being in question, if there's any way possible to verify that the education, the hours are valid, that's what we need to do. Because we didn't go looking for, invalid license. We've gotten notification that some of these schools are in question. So, therefore, I think it's our duty to take the extra step to take a look at them and see if we feel that, they have the valid hours.
So,
And I will add that, we don't know how this will unfold. There may be no applicants from these 22 schools, or there may be many, but in looking at them on a case-by-case basis, even if the board were to issue a license, there is the opportunity and there is the discretion to take efforts to revoke that license if it is later determined that the license was obtained fraudulently. And so it's not a situation where if the license were issued, essentially the person who committed the fraud would be allowed to keep it. The board would have the option of taking the license back, and the board has discretion as to whether to issue it. It would just be looking at the applicants individually on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not issuance is even appropriate in that case.
we have voted and approved a motion that may be improper. Let me see if I can remember enough Robert's rules to get this back. Who made the second? Amy. Amy, if you would withdraw your second and then she withdraws the motion, we can make another motion, I believe.
On my second.
So that previous motion is dead. I'm sorry, that previous motion is dead. So what we want to do is to craft a motion here that has the applicants from these 22 California schools or any other California schools added to this list. have their applications presented to the Reciprocity Committee for individual consideration. Does that sound more appropriate for our authority, Ms. Sherrill?
I think Chairman Gillihan, I think you mentioned earlier that only these 22 schools would need to be reviewed. I don't know that all California applicants would need to come to you if would need to come to the Reciprocity Committee if it's not one of the schools that's currently being
yeah, I'm with those 22.
Yes, that are currently being investigated.
Would you make that motion?
Okay. I'll make a motion to have, of the 22 schools that are listed that we have as of now from California, that, and any others that come or added to it, that all the applications for reciprocity are presented before the board. So that's it.
Second that.
That work for your methodology, Roxana?
We will make it work.
Okay.
They will stay open, and we will justify it.
Okay. Okay. Is there any other discussion? Nana?
Well, I'm kind of confused, but that's nothing unusual. I just didn't understand why we took out that we take a look at their transcript. But I guess if we
we're going to look at the transcripts. Yes.
Okay. So
that should
you're
be added to the motion then.
We're requesting transcripts as well.
Yes.
That needs to be in there, and I think that's good. I think that's good. I'll third it.
I apologize for fumbling this one so badly, folks. I'm just off my game. So that does include requesting transcripts from those. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. On your iPads, before we turn it over to Sherrill, we have one last item that I did want to update everyone on. This is the residential barber program. We have inspected 2 master barbers with their equipment. They came to this building. Until it takes all full force, we're not doing the inspections throughout the state. We do have a plan in action and have been approved. The state sites where training is conducted for the fire and insurance areas, and so we've got a plan when this grows and we have many more. In the meantime, we had them come here. You've got before you on your iPads the final approved version of the residential barber kit. We wanted to present it for you to not only look at and review, but to discuss the specifics. The rule lists the kit exactly as it is on this particular form, and our plan is for the field inspectors to use this form. It's not to be posted anywhere like the shop inspection, but to use it to make sure nothing's missed. This information is also going to be emailed to the barbers that are applying for this specific license and card, that are paying for this, and then we're reviewing with them what they need to bring. So of the 2 that came, both of course forgot items on the list. So it's just something that I need the board to know. So this is going to be a task to get them to come. One had to leave and come back with it and so forth. So nevertheless, these are not things to be negotiated. They have to have everything that's here. And so with that in mind, we will do the best we can to remind them repeatedly of this. Is it the board's thought or decision that if they don't have it, they leave and come back and reschedule? They pay a second fee. I mean, it's just,
Go to your PSI and you don't have it, you have to pay again.
Cool. Oh, that if the board's comfortable with that. Because we waited over an hour and a half just on these 2 to actually get here, and we couldn't have held their hands more if we tried. So it's going to be one of those tasks. But in either case, so this is the kit exactly as it's written. The only thing obviously is the shampoo bowl that's flexible. I did want to bring up, especially since we've got instructors and school owners here, the ultraviolet sanitizer was an issue for the 2 that came. We talked about And I think when we did the list, we talked about that. It's a big ultraviolet sanitizer. So they both said that. You couldn't possibly mean for us to bring it. It can't be carried. So we did research right there and then, and they vary in price from $30, we found one, to about $150, $200. Mr. Beal, has that sound about right?
All right.
They're all over. So both, right there while we were there, ordered their UV sanitizer. We approved them. They are two official master barbers with their residential license working right now. We don't have any in the pipelines, but before we proceeded with larger numbers of these, I wanted the board to look at it, kind of hear the game plan. We'll do our best to get them to remember what they need to do, and if everything here isn't here, their inspection will end and they'll need to pay the $50 again. I hate to send them home for cotton balls, but that's just me being too practical. I'm sorry.
And I will point out, the board can certainly go that route. That would involve failing the barber's inspection, or the board can go the rescheduling route. Of course, as Roxana mentioned, it does involve resources when these are scheduled and et cetera. So that's something for the board to consider. The equipment requirements, the kit requirements are not discretionary except for the shampoo bowl. How it's handled, if everything is not there, is discretionary, but the board does have limited resources, and I think that's what Roxana is pointing out.
They come in, they've taken up so much time. I just think if it's either pass or fail, you either have it or you don't. You know what's on your list, and it should be in order. Like when you go to take your state board, if they don't have it, I'd say fail them and then make them reschedule and come back and pay again. That's what they have their PSIs.
Roxana, on this inspection, do they get a score on this one like you do for a shop?
Not at all. At least not that anything's written in the rule to do it. We have to inspect their kit, and so if the kit has to have all this, it's either there or it's not. Like I said, I was using just my okay. So one went home for the next strips and those kind of things. The UV sanitizer they ordered while they were here. We just had to have the conversation because both showed up and said, well, I knew it was there and you told us to bring it, but it's, I can't bring it. I can't carry it in. So finding the various ones that are less expensive, I asked them both once theirs come in to call me directly and give me some feedback. It's not that we want to push one versus the other, but, we hate to have them spend $150 and then a month later they say this doesn't work.
My question would be, given at-home services has just passed in its entirety without any license or kit needed, when do the barbers show up asking why they have a separate license and a kit that needs to be approved?
Great question.
It's the legislature.
We direct those folks to the legislature and say, sorry. Okay.
In a barber shop, the rule says they have to have a UV on every station. In a cosmetology shop, sufficient for the shop. So there's some discretion there, I guess.
Well, and with the two field inspectors, because I wanted to do as much training as we could with these gentlemen, we had two field inspectors, one of our most experienced, who's also a licensee, and one that's got this area. Because there's certain pockets in Tennessee that are going to do this more than others. And so both said the cosmetology shops have the UV sanitizer. They don't use it. They have it in the back. They don't really use it. Now the barber shops, so the good thing with this being on the equipment list for the barbers is that they both said, oh, I've worked in a shop before. I know what it's like. I just can't bring it in. I can't buy that. That's too big, too expensive. So I think that's one of those differences in the discipline, in the barber versus Cosmo and how they're taught at schools.
And I think
I'm sorry. Whenever they're talking about the cost of it, it's a lot less expensive to buy a UV sanitizer than to go out and lease a space somewhere.
Right.
Cost of doing business there.
Have you ever used the little ones, Ron?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I have some.
So there are good. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think just to clarify, the rule requires the portable UV sanitizer, and that is a totally different size from the regular UV sanitizer. So part of this, I'm assuming that the barbers that came had not ever used a portable UV sanitizer. But part of this is people identifying the products that are currently on the market now that they are going to be transient with their services.
I have a question. Is this list posted on the website?
It's part of the rules, and the rules are on the website. What we are going to do is, as they've applied for it, we have sent them the list. What we find, and this happens all the time, is they don't want to go to the rules to read it. So we still ask them to go to the rules to read it, because the rule covers the fee and it covers a lot of other pieces. But knowing that they may not go to the rules and see it, we have a shortcut to this, and it's just the equipment list, the shop equipment list. We do the same thing. We ask shops to go to the rules and read it, but since we know that they won't, we have a kind of what you need to know before you open a shop, and we list them separately. This is going to be the same way.
And also, will it be in bold lettering that they'll have to pay again?
It'll be up to the board's discretion if that's the case. Obviously,
a lot of man hours to sit and wait.
So I'm open to suggestions. I mean, if you fail it, and if this picked up in volume and we had 5 to 10 barbers every week, we would be doing inspections throughout the state to get them to work soon in what they want to do, right? Because this is considering, especially with our newer barbers getting licensed, that they may not be working in a shop. They really want to be independent. And so we want to license them as quickly as possible. Their license is going out immediately as soon as they meet the requirements. The inspection may wait a little bit, but that way at least you're licensed. If you are working in a shop, you can work in the shop. The card and the inspection may take, I'd hate for it to take more than a week, but again, depending on numbers, those are things that as volume pick up, we hope to have more and more available. So if the board decides that we charge a second time for a failed inspection, that will have to be very bold and center. And it definitely, and Sherelle can correct me, I don't think that was the intent of the statute for us to recharge people. It's just, it's going to happen. Both of these that literally spoke to us on the phone still forgot things.
And I think if there are concerns about that, then the board certainly has the option of simply authorizing the rescheduling of the inspections, and then if we see a high volume, maybe make a determination at that point as to whether or not these should actually become failed inspections that require the assessment of a fee for reinspection.
Recommendations?
I just think if you opened up a shop and you didn't have something in there that was major, then you would not pass your shop opening, and they'd have to come back again, and you'd have to.
And to that, and maybe we don't charge again, just because of the intense number of the work involved between them paying for it and the delay. And Betty can vouch. I mean, we have hundreds a week. So when they forget something, we just fit it into the next round of shop inspections.
Well, did the barbers get their license before they pass this equipment?
Yes. The way we've developed and that's a very good question. We developed the system is to separate the actual license from this residential card, if you will. So when they pass the exams and apply for the license, we can kick that license out within a couple of days, and it shows them active. They could work in a shop, because some might be, right? They could be working in a shop as well. But the piece that's going to take a little bit, that inspection, coordinating it, figuring out where they're going to inspect, making sure they've got the kit ready, that could be delayed, hopefully not a lot, but if they're not in a hurry, these two were delayed quite a bit. They weren't quite in a hurry. They didn't answer back, that kind of thing. So if that's the case, we're not stopping them from working. The actual license has gone out. This inspection and the card that goes with it is traveling by itself, if that makes any sense. And once we inspect it and you pass, then the card goes out and you can start going to residents. So I think that's helpful. It's just I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to look at the inspection barber kit, make sure that we all understand everything on it has to be there. It's a pass or fail, and we can leave it as is, which is, if they fail, we don't charge. We just have them wait longer, and we fit them in as soon as we can, and see what our numbers look like, in June or by the August meeting.
I personally feel that we should make a recommendation of the fee to keep the level of professionalism. If you're going to do something like this in someone's home, then be responsible enough to have everything that you need to show that you are qualified. So I believe we should have that additional fee.
What else?
I will say that, something that Roxana mentioned, you all currently do not require an additional fee with shop inspections. And so, from a consistency standpoint, you all may want to examine this issue from that perspective as well.
I'm really struggling with the disconnect between now a manicurist or a cosmetologist can go into anyone's home with no kit and no inspection and no fees and no additional license, and the barbers have to go through this process and potential additional fees. I think it's just a matter of time before all this goes away.
The beginning of deregulation.
I don't know how you can have it be so totally different than saying Anita can go into someone's home with legally now, right? Until this is signed.
Saying, right.
And you don't need a kit and you don't need any of this stuff.
Yeah, it should be across the board or none at all. Either or.
I just I regardless of whether I think which is right or wrong, they're just so different that I think there's a disconnect.
Absolutely right.
I don't know what to tell these barbers who are trying to do the right thing. I applaud them. I feel terrible saying you need an additional license and additional fee, and then you need another additional fee.
And the board certainly can decide today that if someone happens to be missing a couple of items, that they can just come back and have their inspection at another time and not go the route of requiring that they be failed and an additional fee assessed.
I mean, can they take a picture of the completed kit?
No, it's not discretionary in that sense. They definitely have to have a full, they have to pass the inspection, which requires that they have the full kit. How it's handled if they don't is up to the board, and the board can certainly say to that, the board office can certainly say to that individual that certain items are missing and allow them the opportunity to reschedule the inspection without actually failing the inspection. In other words, not conducting the inspection because certain things aren't there.
And also, I have to come off mute again. Also, I mean, this doesn't prevent anything and it doesn't protect anything. You could have two barbers that are friends and one comes in there for you to inspect his stuff, and then the other one says, "Hey, man, let me borrow your UV thingamajig, and I'm going to go for inspection." And so he takes it in there, and, "Oh, yeah, you're good." And it's, not his.
Why don't we go with, would it be okay if we go with Pharrell's suggestion here, or at least her thoughts on this, and instead of charging them a fee and all that, why don't we have them just come back and have it re-inspected until we have some more data on this to see how many people are really going to be affected. Two people, we've discussed this for quite a while now for two people, which is absolutely worthy. I agree with everything you said. Now that the legislature has changed the requirements on the Cosmo residential, sometimes it's those unintended consequences that created this to begin with. So that might have been a simpler route to take.
Hopefully they'll do away with it for barbers.
Thinking, just coming to the office and having to come back, it would impress upon them enough that they really need to have
Roxanne,
another.
would we need a motion for you on this or no?
I don't think so.
Direction.
Not if we are not pushing for them to pay a second fee.
Yeah.
I think I'm comfortable with, we've discussed it all, and they would fail, which was exactly how Cheryl explained it to me. They need to have it all. They'd fail, and they'd have to come back and adjust to our schedule. And then I'll update the board. Probably if the numbers don't increase drastically by August, I'll give you an idea of where we are.
So we'll have more information then, and
I want
better
to.
judge it.
I wanted to add too, considering that, they're trying to push deregulation on a lot of things here. Making more fees and stuff is really kind of redundant to what we're trying to do, because they're saying that they want to deregulate because it's so burdensome for people to start working. So we don't want to make it harder. So I do agree with you, Ron, and I do have a problem, Amy, with what you said. I have that same issue. If we're a combined board, why is it so different? So I think in facts of deregulations, we should leave it as is.
So we're gonna have them just come back and have that kit rechecked and try to make it as efficient with our man hours as we can. So, okay.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
Before we leave this, Roxanne, I have a question. In the original legislation about the residential barber, was it in the legislation about the equipment list, or did we add that?
We did. The statute passed with allowing residential barbering and allowing rules to be created. It didn't create the fee either. It just said that there would be a fee and they needed to be inspected. It did say there needed to be an inspection and that a residential card would be issued. So we, through rulemaking hearing, came up with the equipment list and then the fees, and we followed the fees to match what we currently have, which would be $50 for an inspection, and the card is $25, which matches other programs that have a card of some sort.
Well, so does the cosmetology one that's going to go into effect when it's signed in the near future, does it allow for us to make rules and do such the same?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, rethinking that, I think we shouldn't even have required the equipment list. Like I said, people can get all kind of ways around that. But man, that makes more work on you and them and everybody. And it doesn't prevent anything, in my opinion. But I was just curious about that.
Yeah, but Nine, if we don't put a list together, then why do anything? Why just not let it be a free for all?
Yeah, but we're not.
That's the other side of it.
We can't put a list together for cosmetology, anything under
Right,
cosmetology.
and that's the real issue, is that they're not letting us do what really needs to be done for the safety of the public.
Yeah, but putting it underneath for the barbers, I mean, if you're going to go into someone's home and cut their hair as a barber, you know what you need. You're going to take what you need, even if you've proven to the state office what you have. You may not even take half of that. And we cannot. There's no way for us to prove that they had it with them when they were actually there. I mean, I don't know.
I will provide further clarification. The statute 62-3-135 did require the applicant to undergo and pass an initial inspection of their equipment used to provide residential services. So when you all promulgated these rules, it was pursuant to the statute that required that equipment be inspected.
For the legislation.
Yeah, we had to do that for the legislation. So
that's barbering, right? Mm-hmm. For the barbering.
Yes. And then that same legislation did not pass for the cosmetology, and then this new piece we got today did. So.
Hasn't signed it yet.
Is there anything else to come before the board?
Yes, I'm going to turn it over to Sherelle for proposed rules that we kind of left aside, and then we know we need to get back to. Did you have a question, Ms. Sappenfield?
I'll just look it up when he's going to say.
Okay, thank you. All yours.
One quick thing I wanted to mention, pursuant to its authority, the board office is scheduling an inspection for a skincare shop that happens to be located inside of a dental office. We did ask that individual consult, contact the dental board and review that issue with them. And that individual has gone before the dental board. And so at this point, according to the normal procedures, her shop inspection is being scheduled, and assuming she meets all the requirements, we will move forward. But I did just want to bring that to you all's attention. We have advised her that the issuance of a license in no way is no way an indicator of the legality of her being able to do that in a dental office, and so she has been advised of that. The next thing, the big thing that I wanted to discuss with you all is the instructor curriculum. We recognize, due to a pretty recent legislative change, that the rules should be updated because it's now a 300-hour instructor training program for both those in the barbering discipline and the cosmetology discipline. Before you have copies of the statutes and the rules. If you will look at the barbering rules and turn to the third page, I've highlighted the Barber Instructor Training Program curriculum. And as you all can see, those hours would need to be revised. And so that's something I wanted to discuss with you all. And then also, if you would look at the cosmetology rule, which is behind those barbering rules, on the second page of the cosmetology rules, highlighted is the requirement for the cosmetology rules. And so I think that's something that we need to discuss so that I can have some guidance in drafting the revisions based on the legislation, because the hours have been reduced to 300.
Sure. Well, I had found that in the law, in the rules, recently. Just when I downloaded a copy a couple of weeks ago from one of my classes. Having looked at that and kind of thought my way through it before today even, I think on the lesson planning, if that reflected 100 hours, and then on the general also 100, I think that would be fine as far as I'm personally concerned. And then under the physical hours, because we've taken shampooing out of a requirement across the other disciplines. But an instructor still needs to know how to teach that. So I think it would be appropriate to have 100 hours on each one of those units. So physical, 100 hours as well. That would give you your 300 hours for the instructor program.
So your recommendation is to remove the word shampooing from the physical
No,
component?
no,
Okay.
because they still need to be taught that because they do chemical removal and things like that.
Okay.
I'm saying that the required total should be 100 hours for each one of those three portions. Lesson planning required total 100 hours. General required total 100 hours, and physical required 100 hours.
Oh, and just break it into thirds.
Breaking it into thirds. I looked at the curriculum in that, and I think it could easily be taught within that.
Cosmetology rule has already been appropriately revised. If you take a look at it, it's already 300 hours. So we just need to review the barbering side. If that is the board's recommendation, it doesn't need to be a vote. I can go and I now have the guidance to draft the changes to this. My only recommendation would be to revisit the things discussed earlier regarding Paul Mitchell. There's a slightly different, you all could give us the authority to communicate to them that you would approve it contingent upon it being 100 hours for lesson planning, 100 hours for general, and 100 hours for physical. That would be my only recommendation, because you all already voted to approve Paul Mitchell's request, but it slightly varies from the rule you all want to move forward with.
I would make a recommendation that we accept Ron's recommendation for the split in hours of 100, 100, and 100. And also, I'd make a motion to recommend that the administration talk to Paul Mitchell and rectify their admission or their submission. So,
Do you need a motion for that, this recommendation?
We would need a vote on the Paul Mitchell matter simply because you all voted earlier, but we don't need a vote on the rules. I was just really seeking guidance so that I know what to put before you all, hopefully in the near future, with other rules that are in the pipeline as well.
So motion to revise Paul Mitchell's authorization and communicate that to them. Is that correct, Mona?
yes, that would be correct.
Second.
Have any other discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Frankenstein.
I have nothing further.
Anything else to come in front of the board today? Okay. Anything else? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Smile on your face.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Frank. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Say no. Adjourn.
Thank you, Ron. Well done.
Abstaining there, Ron. Thank you, sir. That's right.
Motion already.
I have no idea why it would look that
No
way.
problem, man.
You came back. You rebounded.